to another edition of the Umoja Circle. Along with my Rafiki, or friend in the Kiswahili language, I am Keith Smokey Johnson, and welcome to another discussion here at the Umoja Circle. And for those of you who are new to the Umoja Circle, we are an African-centered talk show where we correct errors where errors are found, and we introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. Welcome, Brother Williams. Is a pleasure, and I'm very excited about this particular topic. This topic that we are talking about today has been in the news for the last, maybe about a year or two. And I equate it to what happened to George Floyd. And what I mean is the response by the world. What we saw in the streets of America were not only black kids, but white kids talking about Black Lives Matter, holding up signs, walking with us, not only here in America, but in France and other parts of the world. And to me, the people who occupied the seats of power, at least since the Trump administration, the Republican, I don't call them a party, they're more like a regime, who are still in power. I think it freaked them out. They saw, again, young white kids and black kids walking together in a sense that scared them, because their policies and their way of thinking goes back to me since the Civil War. What I mean is, and what we're going to be talking about is this topic here. I'm just going to put up the image. You see what this thing is. You might have heard of this thing called critical race theory. This theory came out around that period of time, 2 years ago, and all of a sudden it is some kind of theory that based on the Republicans who are the purveyor of this type of social, cultural war type of policies that we've been seeing, have been using this theory that goes back to the 70s, and this is the thing that Brother Williams and I are going to be talking about, to put truth to the concept of a black intellectual policy that's been hijacked by the neocons and the racist people who were on the fringe even of the neoconservatives who've been around for, since the 60s, since Goldwater time. But there has been a fringe group who followed the policies of white racism. They are the progenitors of the followed the ideas of the Confederate Party, in which we as people of African descent have been a threat. And they have been stirring up the pot, not only in the last year or two, but ever since the 13th Amendment, when we've gained things by law that gave us the right of citizenship, from the 13th Amendment, which freed us, to the 14th Amendment, which gave us civil rights. And ever since the 14th Amendment, it has never been allowed to its full fruition, in which we are given fair and equal process through the laws as American citizens, okay? And this is the concept that this brother here, Dr. Derek Williams, was thinking about when he came up with this theory. One of the men, but he's called the godfather of critical race theory. He was a legal professor. He died in 2011, not too long ago. But he was a pioneer legal scholar at Harvard University, okay? And we do have our black intellectuals, and we need to know more about people like Dr. Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw and these great legal minds that we've had as black people, and we must uphold our way of seeing the world. And this thing called critical race theory is his. He has a statement that kind of emphasized why he was thinking like that. And this is what I came up with, and I believe in too. It appears that my worst fears have been realized, and he's talking, this is about the 70s. We have made progress in everything, yet nothing has changed. That's a powerful statement. and it's out of that foundation that his idea that was coined not by him, even though he's called the Godfather, as Kimberly Crenshaw in the 80s coined it, critical race theories. Brother Derek, you want to add to that a little bit?
I think that's a good foundational introduction to the topic. I would like to contemporize it even more so.
Sure.
And say that often when we talk about theoretical frameworks and theories, the words get in the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not going to let a group of people off so easily. We often attribute neoconservatives. I would say that what has given this whole controversy, which is another term that is often applied
another word
to things,
word salad,
is the common person. Okay, the person who has become very comfortable in their life habits, who have integrated and accepted their everyday privileges as a normal thing that they somehow was passed on to them by God.
The American
and often the Constitution represents that. So what I'm going to say is that like Dr. Williams and Derek Bell and all, while they may have attached words to a process that has been in vogue for a very long time, the unfortunate thing is that critical race theory, that word has literally been applied to any discussion about race at all. So it seems that whenever there's a pushback, and as you introduced the program and talking about George Floyd, there have been thousands of George Floyds, and there has been thousands of pushbacks. And it seems that whenever there is a progressive movement to legitimize our presence, there's always a pushback for that very reason, that people who are comfortable in where they're at begin to see their status as being threatened. And so we can often come up with words to attach to different titles: critical race theory, affirmative actions, diversity training. But at the very core of the discomfort and the pushback is recognizing that there are groups of people, and a large group of people, the African American in this country, that is demanding equality. And people are going to have to share and give up some things, and they're not really basically ready to do that. And so as Dr. Williams and Dr. Bell put a title, I want the viewing audience to know that critical race theory is an acronym for talking about race
in America,
in any aspect,
in our particular experience.
We want to establish that right now. We give attribution to people who come up with terms, but we want you to know the contextual basis of where this came from. And I think Brother Smokey sets the foundation in a superb way for the discussion. So,
I mean, it's this thing that we are describing, that something happened in the 21st century, is nothing more than the same centuries old, like you're saying, struggle between black people here in America, expressing the truth of who we are,
Well said.
And our own unique experience in America.
Well said.
Against the myth of what other people say we are, to justify the laws that were passed, okay? And that's all critical race theory. Dr. Bell and those who came up with that theory was to focus on the effects of the laws that were passed. We're talking about slave codes. We're talking about how could that long-term experiencing in that country that says it's the land of the free, but the laws that affect people that look like him and look like me, we were not free.
That's right.
This contradiction we must discuss.
Yes.
We can't ignore. We can't. We got to make the people who are in that comfort zone you're talking about, and we're talking about white America.
Absolutely.
And we got to make them understand that this America that they were taught when they were 5 and 6 and 7, this exceptional, was a myth.
Yes.
As long as we exist in this country.
Yes.
And as long as our experience
Yes.
is different than your experience, even though in by the 14th Amendment, we were told we were citizens of this country.
Yes.
And that was in the 1868.
Yes.
We're in 2022,
Yes,
and
yes.
we're still dealing with and struggling with the right to our rights as citizens.
Yes. Yes.
And how could you be comfortable in that world ignoring this truth? And we must talk about why.
Yes.
And we got elections coming up, and the people that were affected by the critical race theory, because critical race theory at Dr. Bell since 1970 was only taught in law schools.
Yes. Yes.
Not this nonsense you're hearing from people like Ted Cruz, Senator of Texas,
Yes.
you know, or all these other neocons who are stirring up the racial pot. They don't care about the white children that might be taught this so-called horrible thing. They just want to maintain power, and they want to use whatever. And critical race theory is the new boogeyman that they pulled out of nowhere and lying about it. But we must set this thing straight. That's our intellectual thought. And how dare you use our intellectual rationale to express ourselves and use it as something in negative?
Yes.
How dare you?
Well said. Well said, Smoke. And I want to say that the egregious act of taking a theory and applying it literally to any conceptual model,
A grab bag.
okay, shows you the very nature of what is at hand. And so we get caught, we get focused, like the expression, stepping on ants while elephants are falling out the tree, adequately describes essentially what goes on. I came out of an era when I was serving in the United States Air Force, where I taught race relations, equity treatment, advanced EO principles.
Those were the progressive things that were put together in the
Absolutely.
70s and 80s.
To educate
Yes.
the armed forces, you can't fight a war if you're fighting each other in the foxhole.
Exactly.
Okay, that kind of concept.
Yeah.
So you could certainly understand the import of developing courses to get people to understand the dynamics that were at work. Well, as we fast forward to our discussion today, we want you to understand we're very aware of the process that happens when we use the term critical race theory. You create a monster in your mind, but I want you to know the monster has already existed.
It's been existing.
And you can call
Thank
a
you,
monster
brother.
anything you want. You can call it affirmative action. You can call it critical race theory. You can call it diversity in the workplace. What really is causing the discomfort, what's really causing the discomfort is the realization that we're talking about equity programs to rectify the wrongs that have been done. And so as Smokey so eloquently laid out, these people who came up with these theories are actually just reflecting reality and putting a title at the top of it, okay? And so if you're looking for a course called critical race theory, yeah, you're going to see some components. But when you get to the point that you just go through a basic workforce diversity program and you attribute the outcome to critical race theory, you can see the game that's being played.
It's a game, brother.
Okay? But it's the game that has been
game.
played,
Yeah.
as Smokey pointed out, since the beginning of this country, and the recognizing that there are termites in our constitutional foundation.
For example, critical race theory is not being taught in kindergarten or middle school or pre-K or high school. It is a course that since the 70s, one of the progress of our generation, the baby boomers, when we were saying, say it proud, I'm black and I'm proud, and we were expressing ourselves, and we forced institutions like Harvard, Brown University, Stanford, to start putting classes to reflect our story, okay? There was, Dr. Bell at that time said, well, let's have courses, because he was focused on, as a lawyer, as a law professor, and like Professor Crenshaw, the sister in the 80s, they started teaching the people who are going to be future congressmen and lawyers, because they go to Harvard Law School, Stanford Law School. That's what the people who are in power today, like Ted Cruz, who went to Harvard, where they taught critical race theory, and look at the nonsense he's talking as if he never heard of it. If he graduated law school in Harvard since the 70s, he was taught how the laws affected black people for the last 400 years. That's what critical race theory said. You are the future of this country. You are going to be the mayors of the country. You're going to be the congressmen. You're going to be the state senators. All these people who are lawyers, if any lawyers went to a higher degree, which I mean a master's or doctorate of law, you are going to be taught critical race theory. And to come today in front of our faces acting like you never heard of it or giving us the lie that we're going to be teaching third graders this nonsense. This is what we're dealing with. And anybody who, I'm tired of holding back with these Republicans, even the ones who are, I could never deal with, who are so-called conservatives of the Reagan era, don't like these far right-wing people who, since the Trump administration has come into power. And they don't care about the white children. They just want to maintain power, and they're going to use anything to keep it. And they are lying. Lying.
And certainly the force behind the topic, and as you can see, the emotional connection to it, is apropos. And as I slow it down a little bit, I'm going to also say there's a contradictory element to all of this. As Smokey pointed out, people like Ted Cruz and other Congress representatives and senators.
But you see the news every day now.
Who went through and Smokey said and was taught. Now I want you to understand, I can sit in the classroom and get the lesson and not be taught diddly squat.
I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
So that says a lot about the student as well. Okay. It's like when we in the service, armed forces, when people had a mandate of getting race relations training. It was race relations 1, race relations 2, race relations 3, and each phase introduced something else. Well, if you were not receptive to the information, okay, you sat there rejecting everything that you heard, okay? But I want you to understand, viewing audience, that the term critical race theory is not, on one hand, we're talking about a theory, but on the other hand, we're talking about a process that you see performed all the time, okay? And people are trying to make a distinction of critical race theory. We theorize about the cause and effect of everything. As a manager, when you sit down and apply the principles of planning, coordinating, organizing, you have to ask the question, how can I make this program effective by considering all of the things that are going to impact on my plan, okay? So the same thing with the race, okay? Same thing with the race. You got to ask the question, where are we? What have we already done? What haven't we done? And how did we end up right back in this position?
And how can we make it better?
And how can we make it better?
Yeah, you have to have this critique, and that's
what
Dr. Bell and those scholars were doing, and they were not, But again, this term is a label put on a bag.
Yes.
And they know that there's a lot of white Americans, a large portion, because a large portion voted for Trump.
Absolutely.
I'll be truthful. So that means a large portion.
The largest portion.
Yeah, a large portion of this society still don't want to accept the fact that what they have in America is still, America is according to countries, young.
Yes.
When you talk about China and Kemet or Egypt.
When you consider the thousands of years that other governments survived,
and
were babies.
And the foundation of America, scientifically, is what we're dealing with. America is suffering from what is called cognitive dissonance. And for those of you who don't know, I know it sounds like a big word, but dissonance is that uncomfortable feeling you feel when something you were taught since you were a child. Like, for example, when you didn't know you were adopted till you were 15. Then you found out that the people you thought were your parents You thought that truth, you found out it was not the truth. That thing that you feel, regardless of how you might rationalize it, is the dissonant, that uncomfortable. Who am I? Everything is a lie. And that's what America is facing today. Because when we speak our cultural truth, we don't make America look like the land of the free and the home of the brave. And America got to face that thing that what you are taught in school is not critical thought, it's a myth.
Yes, yes, yes.
And what we have is not a free society, we have a caste society. No different than what you see in India. But there's a book out that called Caste that I read,
yes,
that opened my eyes,
yes,
to this truth.
Yes.
Where black people have been always put on, is two tiers. There's the tier where white Americans have been always by law put, and there's another tier where the rest of us, even though we have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, have been placed by law. This is a society of laws. And how those laws affect our relationship to each other is the issue at hand. And that's what Dr. Bell and those scholars were, like you said, critiquing. And
yes,
we have to
yes,
critique it to
yes,
this day.
yes,
We
yes.
haven't answered any of those questions,
Yes.
but we have to face this truth.
And I think, as with any problem that we're trying to resolve, the codification of the principles of a problem, in other words, being able to, as Smokey pointed out, identify those factors and those components
True
that
dialogue.
have brought us to where we're at, that is the thing to do. Now, and there's nothing sophisticated about that process. In science, you see critical analysis taking place all the time. You don't criticize going in and having a doctor saying we have to run a number of tests and we have to consider where you came from and where the disease is. Well, America has a disease, and that disease is called racism.
There you go, brother.
And until
There you
you
go.
critically examine it, until you put it on the operating table and look at the factors that cause it to be exasperated,
Exactly.
it ain't getting no better.
And
As
it's
simple
getting
as that.
worse. Look what's going on in front of the camera today. Don't listen to us. Look through your own experience, those of you who are watching this show. Look what's saying in the news. Look what's happening in the world. Look what's happening in Russia. Are they doing anything? Are they burning books? Those who are pushing critical race theory are dictating today what books we should read. Don't look about our generation, we baby boomers, or your generation if you're a parent. Look at that 5 or 10-year-old child that's in your household and what's going to be like when laws are passed that's going to exist in 10 years, in the 2030s. Okay,
Yes.
with the America that child
Yes.
is going to school, getting on that bus and going to school,
Yes.
is going for a world that they think they exist today. Will that world exist if these neocons, these right-wing white supremacists who are in power now, who are shaping the voting laws, who are shaping women's rights, who are not pushing criminal justice laws that are being blocked in Congress today? You think that this is a country of laws, and you think in the next 5 or 10 years, and who are bringing up lying theories like the evils of critical race theory into your ears right now, are going to care about that child that you, especially if you're black or brown or yellow or any other color, you are going to be affected by the laws that are going to be put on the books right now.
Well, what frightens me, and as Smokey has laid out, in asking the viewing audience to answer that question, what frightens me even more is how the average person, the average white person, the average person who uses what they hear about the critical race theory to justify their entrenchment where they're at.
That's the key.
And begin to look at everything that other group does from a critical eye. Oh, that's why these things have happened. They do this. Something's wrong with their culture. Something's wrong with them. And so when you begin to justify your advantages, when you begin to look at where you're at as a normal process, That's the fearful part. You know, the neocons, the folk who don't make it a secret of what their intentionality is. You know, we can identify them, but the neighbor next door.
Yep.
You know, who says, hey, you don't need to be talking to them, or makes stereotypical statements that continue to keep them from moving and growing and progressing. The parent who says, I don't want my child going to that school because they celebrated Black History Month.
And that's the goal.
That's my fear.
That's the goal.
The average person. And so this concept gets them excited, okay? And historically, they've always had a concept to push back and get folk excited when we begin to make gigantic shifts in progressive advancements in our society.
And that's what it's called. It's called white backlash.
White backlash.
And
yes,
when I
yes,
said earlier of the show is that that's the struggle that we're in right now. There was a military strategist that everybody read at the end of the turn of the 19th century. It was Karl von Clausewitz. And he said that politics is war by other means.
Without bloodshed.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, so if you don't understand that politics is a war, and and that's why if you read any of the so-called founding fathers, because they're not founding fathers for me, because they were nothing more than slaveholding colonizers from the perspective of Black people of African descent who didn't benefit from the Declaration of Independence or even the Constitution, when it was ratified. We were just 3/5 of a human being, and they refused to even talk about us.
Yes.
They wrote it. I'm not making this up. They wrote that themselves. Read their diaries and their letters to each other. They didn't want to talk about it.
Yes.
But we're here. We're going to be talking about this in the next show. We got a few minutes left in this segment, but I want to end with this, and we'll start up again. I want to end with this thought. You know, this is race has always played a role in shaping the concept of democracy, shaping the concept of economics, and shaping the concept of citizenship in America by law. We got a few more minutes, less than 20 minutes. You got anything to end with saying, brother?
Well said, Smoke. And again, you have to accept the reality. You have to accept the sickness in order to take the medicine to get well.
And with that, we'll say bye, Hotep, peace.